There is one quest chain in The Witcher 3 that still leaves its mark on me every time I play it. But the irony is that it might be a section of the game you don't even remember: Broken Flowers. It's even a rather anonymous name, Broken Flowers. What does that even mean? At first I thought it might be a reference to the State of Dandelion's Tavern the first time we arrived there, but no, it's actually a reference to a movie by the same name starring Bill Murray, a film I've actually seen but have no memory of, which actually puts another layer of irony on here. The fact that I can't even remember a movie referenced in my most beloved questline, a questline that is likely to be quite forgetful for the majority of people. But let me tell you why it shouldn't be, and why it isn't. If there is one thing The Witcher 3's got going for it, it might be its dedication to a dark, yet lively and realistic world. One that feels fantastical enough to be exciting and unique, while simultaneously eerily reminiscent of actual European environments. Of course, The Witcher 3 doesn't necessarily showcase its beauty right away. On the contrary, I always found the first 10 to 20 hours or so to perhaps be the darkest and dreariest. After waking up from a nightmare only to fight rabid ghouls, to hacking and slashing through mean-spirited bandits, to helping a drunken baron with finding his lost wife and daughter, only to be confronted with choices where there is no good option, and all of it taking place in a rainy, swampy backwater that's seen its share of war and famine, crossing the bridge from Velen into Novigrad is quite the portal into another world. And you feel it right away. From having ridden across a field of rotting corpses and making your way past a row of refugees hoping for a better life, Novigrad, just across the narrow Yaruga River, feels like riding into safety, a dream that suddenly takes over for the previous 10 hours of nightmares. Here, there are no fields of corpses and corpse eaters. Instead, we ride past trees bathing in sunlight, bright and colorful dirt roads that almost look happy to see us, watchtowers that oversee the lands below, and both farms and fields that are not in constant danger of being pillaged or overrun by monsters. Even though I do suppose we come across the odd necrophage here and there. But beyond the immediate environment, the city of Novigrad with its towering walls lay ahead, and this is where our questline begins. By now, if you're lucky and haven't strayed away from the road, you might have just made it all the way to the city gates without encountering one monster, or without even drawing your sword against human foes. That alone represents a major change of pace, but we are admittedly reminded of the fact that not even Novigrad is safe from violence and power-hungry men in the first quest there, Pyres of Novigrad, where we are reunited with Triss. But that's precisely why Broken Flowers is so special. And if you think this video is something special thus far, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like and considered subscribing to the channel. It really means a lot. You see, by the time you ride through one of Novigrad's majestic gates, you would already have solved most of your quests by fighting, meeting a nasty ghost, or by dungeon crawling in one way or another. But now, even though admittedly the very first part of our quest happens to feature a fight, Broken Flowers slows everything down. This is the first time in the game that we reunite with one of Geralt's close male friends outside his teacher Vesemir from the previous games.
Hey Zoltan, you look good.
You, though, you've withered a bit. Something worrying you?
Zoltan is not too different from Geralt actually. He's funny in sort of an understated way.
Nose is too small.
Aye, and the sword's too big.
Serious, and just as interested in finding Dandelion as we are. If you've played The Witcher 2 or The Witcher 1 for that matter, it'll mean that much more to you, since we do spend quite a lot of time with Zoltan in our past adventures. And seeing as we've been mired in a sad, war-torn wasteland for so long, seeing a genuine friendly face really warms. Of course, Dandelion is not here, but we luckily happen upon a book with some interesting clues. You see, Dandelion is not just an old friend of Geralt whom we need to find for story reasons, but he's also a poet and, importantly, a ladies' man. Dandelion's book is filled with names of women he's been intimate with in one way or another, and I find it endearing listening to Geralt's and Zoltan's back and forth when talking about who these women might be.
A baroness within reach and he settled for a chambermaid?
Dandelion's not one to judge folk by their station. You know that. Like he says, in the alcove, we're all equals.
Vespula. Name rings a bell. She threw his knickers out the window.
That's her.
Hollered something about him being a scoundrel with a voice like a consumptive pheasant.
That's her.
Threw flower pots at him.
Guess soul flames never die.
A figure most rare, her nature dual. Look deep in her eyes or be made a fool. Well, well, seems fascinated with this one.
Not without reason. Never been much for elven women myself, but this one's exceptional. Dare say Francesca Findabair'd be jealous.
You want to take this one then?
Nah, you can have her.
Why?
See, elven beauty is like a young Beauclair wine, whereas I prefer vodka straight up.
Now we still have to find Dandelion, but to track him down, we first have to get clues on where to go from the women he's been seeing lately, and that becomes the gateway to this fantastic questline. Now Novigrad is a big place, and we are tracking down 5 women, each of them located in different parts of the city and its surroundings. The fact that you're able to go after them in any order of your choosing helps to make it feel freer, but I always tend to go for the 2 closest women first, Vespula and Elihal. I want to point out an important part of why I love this quest so much. Like I said, Novigrad is a big place, a city with several districts both within and outside its walls, which on its own and in itself is a triumphal achievement on the part of developer CD Projekt Red. But on top of the visual spectacle comes the realization that each district offers its very own local musical theme. And the reason why I'm so fond of Broken Flowers isn't just because we're chasing down women, but because the quest in itself takes us all over the city and kind of inherently serves as an introduction to Novigrad itself. When leaving the Rosemary Thyme, Dandelion's Tavern, we hear the arguably most common Novigrad theme, an energy-filled tune that fits the bustle and activity of the city. But when we exit the city through the Tredogor Gate, another track hits us, wildly different at that, much calmer and zen, one that happens to be one of my absolute favorite personal tracks from this entire game. This track, commonly referred to as Outskirts of Novigrad, only plays here, in this tiny section of the map outside of Novigrad. It's so anonymous, yet so memorable, and I think it's a testament to The Witcher 3's absolute dedication to perfection in every part of its being. This is where we find Vespula, a washerwoman who saw Dandelion a while ago. She's currently being torpedoed by goons who've come to reclaim a loan, and we can choose to either fight, persuade them to leave, or pay them off, or, if you're a dishonorable coward, leave Vespula to be beaten up by the thugs. Talking to her after the fact though, she is clearly angry with Dandelion, who apparently eyed other women while seeing Vespula.
What do you think? Where could Dandelion be?
Probably out whoring. That horse pheasant, that lying scoundrel.
Ouch. What did he do to get your goat?
Same thing as ever. Prize bullshitter came back saying it was till death do we part this time. And no more than a week passed before I spotted him in Harbourside, strolling with some trollop on his arm. 'Twas the last straw. All those questions about the washerwomen at the bathhouse, then this. I beat him black and blue and threw him out on his ear.
Dandelion ask you about other washerwomen? Not terribly subtle even for him.
Maybe he likes some sudsy.
Maybe. But what did he ask about, exactly?
Oh, this and that, really. What's it like at the bathhouse? Have I got any friends there? What are their working hours? I don't know. Maybe he's looking to hire one for his tavern. Maybe I got all in a huff for no reason.
She doesn't really have much information to part with, but I always find it funny that she ends the conversation still wanting to see Dandelion, despite everything she's just told us.
Listen, when I find Dandelion, anything I should tell him?
No. I mean, tell him he's a two-faced snake, but it would be nice if he dropped by.
It's a rather human moment, I think, and it speaks to both humans and our feelings as multifaceted things, and sometimes even contradictory. For something even more multifaceted, we move away from Vespula, but still find ourselves in the far corners district of Novigrad's outskirts. Despite being a kind of poorer workers' district, it remains quaint and beautiful where it lays between the grand city walls on one side and the river on the other. But moving forward now, we enter the house of Elihal, the second person in Dandelion's journal. However, as is evident right from the get-go, Elihal, an elf, isn't exactly what Geralt had expected.
Thought Elihal was one of Dandelion's girlfriends.
Oh, so it's that. Wait here.
In fact, she is a he, or perhaps even a they. And as a matter of another fact, the Witcher wiki page does refer to Elihal as a he, but also as being gender fluid, and is what we might call a crossdresser. Now Elihal's a complicated character, and while a crossdresser is what we'll call him, he's not necessarily doing it out of the wish to bend genders. Instead, he explains that clothes allow him to essentially become different people, no matter their stature or gender, and that he fulfills a fantasy of freedom.
I know this is none of my business, but why
do I dress up? As a child, I dreamt of becoming a Doppler when I grew up. I became a tailor instead. Discovered clothing. Costumes can express all the complexities of one's personality. I'm a Redanian countess one day, a dockside thug the next. That is true freedom.
Now I think that's quite beautiful, and what makes this conversation endearing is how open-minded or arguably indifferent Geralt is to concepts he's never come across before. Plus his as always understated humor at the end.
Have you never thought to become someone else? Even for a moment? Must be horribly boring being a witcher all the time.
I managed to stay interested.
The information Elihal gives us isn't necessarily that great, although he does tell us that Dandelion asked about an alchemist, and so we move on. Now though, we turn our nose back into the city, but rather than keeping on listening to the virile Novigrad theme, we hear instead the more somber, quiet theme playing in the bits, the poorest part of Novigrad.
No bread, no coin, all is shite.
Help! Save me! I'm dying of poverty.
Folk in this city, racial hygiene's as poor as their personal hygiene.
Of all places, why did that mage have to blow himself up in my alley?
It gives off a completely different vibe and tone than the main section of the city and the outskirts, feeling more claustrophobic and run down, but still carrying its own charm. It's a section you might not even have come across otherwise at this stage, other than for the Triss mission, since it is in the city's northeastern part, and most of what's going on is located in the more active and grand part of the city. Either way, even though it remains run down, there is a certain charm to it, and I think by virtue of simply having a full-sized poor district, that Novigrad is brought to life even more. This is where we meet the beautifully named Marabella, an elementary school teacher who's busy teaching when we arrive. She tells us that we'll have to wait if we want to ask questions, but depending on our mood, we can either wait outside for her class to finish, or we can answer questions from the children in true Geralt fashion.
So, who would like to ask the first question? Me! What's it mean that witches are lecturers?
It means that due to our mutations, we have an overdeveloped libido.
Libido?
When a girl likes a witcher, the witcher says, "What will you give me for killing a monster?" And she says, "Anything you want." So the witcher says, "Heh heh heh, then you'll give me something you weren't expecting at all." And that's where little witches come from.
Children, what's the meaning of this?
Marabella has no idea where Dandelion is. Shocker at this point, I know. But she does tell us he took a great fascination with mold. When we couple it with Elihal's alchemy tip, that we might begin to insinuate that Dandelion was onto something, and that something wasn't Marabella's poetry.
Did he mention my poetry? Horses have always fascinated me. I've always longed to extol their noble beauty. Did you see any of my work at Dandelion's? Mere exercises, true, but I'd be curious to know what you thought of them.
No, didn't see any.
Gee up! Her snaky whip rose skyward. Gee-haw! Crack! She reined the beast in. The stallion danced betwixt her thighs. Lather bathed its chinny chin.
Sorry, don't know much about poetry.
But that's essentially it, and we leave the bits behind for a district that's extremely close in distance, just up a few beautifully crafted stairs actually, but very far away in terms of the socioeconomic, namely the Gildorf district, the richest of them all. They make it pretty obvious too. The beautiful residences, the live music, the embassy, the high elevation of it all, and of course, a high-end brothel that also serves as the venue for the Great Gwen tournament later on. If the visuals don't do for you, then the theme will. The music suddenly sounds grander, more royal and proud, almost like the tunes shower you with gold dust as you make your way around the square. I love that it's much happier than the theme from the bits, but at the same time a lot more understated than the active main Novigrad theme, which I think reflects the perceived or at least the portrayed nature of wealth and the affluent quite nicely. From the top, and depending on where you stand, you get a great view of parts of the city here, although we're certainly sheltered from its worse off parts, and we also get to look upon the temple district even higher up, which for most of the game actually remains a bit off the beaten path, as very few quests, not even this one, leads us there. In fact, we're heading for that embassy I mentioned, because we're going to see the Nilfgaardian ambassador's daughter, Rosa of Attre. Now depending on your choices, this may be slightly easier or slightly harder. You see, Rosa of Attre resides in that ambassador's residence, which happens to be quite heavily guarded. You have two choices in how to enter it. If you talk to Zoltan about Attre in the beginning of the quest, you already know she does fencing lessons, meaning you can impersonate her fencing instructor, giving you easy access through the main door. If not, you can sneak around the back and enter the residence that way, although I personally like the first approach more. No matter how you're getting in though, you'll end up becoming her temporary fencing instructor either way by your own admittance or Rosa's, and end up fighting her in a non-lethal match before we can ask her about Dandelion. As it turns out, there was no real relationship going on here, just Dandelion singing his ballads and asking about a dead Margrave. But we are told that he sometimes mentioned a certain woman's name, which will be of interest to us soon enough.
Who'd Dandelion sing about? Know anything about her?
I believe she's a poetess, or trebaritz. Very skilled and exceptionally talented, of course.
To me, the Attre section of this quest is the weakest. Perhaps I feel that way because it takes place in a dark basement, perhaps because the soundtrack is that of the mischievous Nilfgaardians, or because the entire quest revolves around fencing. But either way, our next and last visit is arguably the most interesting one, namely Molly. Molly is the maid of Baroness Maria Louisa Lavalette, a name which might be familiar to the Witcher 2 players, seeing as the Lavalette family featured relatively prominently there. At any rate, the Lavalette family lives not far from the Attre residence, although a bit down the road, but remaining in this beautifully sun-bathed upper district. You can tell where Maria lives by the giant banners waving off the residence, as the Lavalette insignia of a man holding a severed head features proudly, which the connoisseur might again remember from The Witcher 2. However, when we arrive, Molly is nowhere to be found. Instead, we're met by at least one, but perhaps two familiar faces. Morvan Voorhis, whom we met earlier in the game, and Maria herself, whom we met in The Witcher 2. Turns out Molly is currently at the wealthy Vegelbud residence rather far outside the city. But this is an interesting encounter for more than one reason actually. You see, depending on your actions in The Witcher 2 or your choices during the earlier conversation with Voorhis, Maria will act very differently towards you, depending on whether you either did or confessed to either kill or save Maria's son Aaron in the previous game. She will either head back inside the house, hating you, or be at least relatively happy to see you, and come with you to the Vegelbud residence, along with Voorhis as well.
Looking for a girl named Molly. Heard she works here.
My maidservant. I'm afraid she's currently at the home of my dear friend Patricia Vegelbud.
Perhaps Geralt could accompany us. He could speak with Molly at the races.
Is that something you'd consider, Witcher? Care to partake of some sophisticated diversion?
Even though this questline and this video is mostly about Novigrad itself, our short stay at the Vegelbud residence, which in fact encompasses the massive and beautiful fields to Novigrad's east, do fit very well with the atmosphere and theme of the questline. We're still in a sort of summery haze here, with the estate itself looking absolutely beautiful, with large trees creating shades in the sun, flowers blooming everywhere, and of course, the horse race taking place as we speak. If you're so inclined, you can partake in the race yourself, which I of course always do, not least of all to hear that charming racing music.
What a thrill! A beautiful victory!
Thanks.
For one for whom every horse is a roach, you carry yourself exquisitely in the saddle.
It's only after the race that Molly shows up and we get to talk to her, and I love how Geralt is conversationally forced to agree to the myths Dandelion has spread about them.
Call me Geralt.
Geralt! That Geralt! The one Dandelion's rescued time and time again!
Wouldn't be here if not for Dandelion.
Told me all about your adventures. How he'd ready you for battle with his songs. How he tamed the Kairan by playing his lute.
I meant that literally. Dandelion's why I'm here. Came to ask you about him. Know where he might be?
But as is tradition by now, Molly doesn't necessarily have a lot to say, other than the fact that she's seen Dandelion with his supposed sister, although Geralt knows better than to believe Dandelion has a sister, and he fails to believe it in the most Geralt way at that.
Or maybe his sister could help you. Such a nice girl.
You do realize Dandelion doesn't have a sister?
Sure he does. Saw him myself. Funny, she don't look like him at all. Blonde, for starters. Maybe they've different fathers.
Different mothers, too.
After the conversation, you can ride back to Novigrad on your own, or ride back with the party you came with, which I always thought was a nice way to end the quest. And speaking of ending the quest, that was the last of our 5 women tracked down, and we must make our way back to Zoltan to debrief. Of course, if you've been following some of the clues, it's become clear that there's a final 6th woman out and about, and our Broken Flowers quest isn't done before we've met her. We're headed to the Kingfisher Inn to watch the performance of Priscilla, Dandelion's supposed lover, and what's about to unfold is one of those game-defining moments that stays with you, something as simple as a song.
You flee, my dream come the morning, your scent, berries tart, lilac sweet, to dream of raven locks and twisted stormy, of violet eyes glistening as you weep.
After the performance, we finally get to talk to Priscilla, and so our introduction to Novigrad is complete. You'll certainly come across places you haven't been in Novigrad yet, both immediately and long after this quest, but to me, Broken Flowers really provides me with that postcard-like impression of this massive city, taking us from its modest outskirts to its impoverished interior and wealthy high points, and if nothing else, it represents a major change of pace from everything we've encountered in the game so far. I wouldn't claim that Broken Flowers is the high point in the game, nor that there aren't more quaint or equally magical sections. But to me, Broken Flowers delivers a certain kind of understated and modest beauty that the game does so exceptionally well. And I find that it does so without necessarily even meaning to do it, but rather that it all comes together so well because of the constant dedication to quality and immersion in every aspect. And that is why it's my favorite questline in the game.
Well, seems fascinated with this one.
Did you remember that this quest even existed? And if so, what are your feelings about it? Let me know your thoughts on Broken Flowers and this video in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!